Hello, we're going to talk about the fact that when you install the vCenter server and you connect it to a database server such as SQL, it actually installs all these different jobs that SQL is going to use to kind of maintain the database and keep things cleaned up. So in fact, let's launch Management Studio on my SQL server and we'll take a look at what those jobs look like. So I'm going to connect in as an admin, and if you drill down past the SQL Server agent through the jobs, you can see either in the root here or through the details of the Object Explorer, the fact that there's anywhere from 8 to 10 jobs that are used to maintain the vCenter database. And they're actually pretty easy to identify because they have kind of a similar name of this whole past day, past month, etc. But they also end with the name of the database. So every job that ends with this VCDB happens to be a job that is running maintenance for my SQL database for the vCenter server. And I just happen to call my database VCDB. Yours might be different. It might be called vCenter or Fun Times or SpongyBob, whatever. And this is great because when you install vCenter, the jobs are put in there automatically. There's nothing you have to do. But what if you want to change SQL servers or reinstall or upgrade or whatever it may be? Well, then those jobs won't be there just naturally. You'll have to make sure that they're put on to the server either by when you install vCenter a new time, it'll put them in there for you, or manually if you're just moving the database and not manipulating something within vCenter. So I'm going to show you the process that you can use to quickly find these jobs and get them inserted and added to your SQL server. So first off, if you need to find the SQL jobs, you don't have to create these by hand. If you switch over, I'm going to switch over to my vCenter server. They're actually always on the server itself, so you can get to these jobs anytime you want. And if you explore your computer, it really depends on where you installed vCenter and what version of Windows that you're running. And I'm on Windows 2008 R2, and I've installed vCenter to this E drive. You can see I've denoted it's the VC drive, so for vCenter. So if you drill into vCenter program files, because it's a 64-bit application, we'll go to VMware, Infrastructure, and then Virtual Center Server. And there's actually a SQL folder within here that has all the jobs. Now I'm going to back up 1 second. If you're on an older version of vSphere, usually 4. Whatever, the jobs will be in the root of this folder. So they'll show up just as root objects in here. And as you get to 5 and later, the jobs are put into their own folder called SQL. So if we go in here, there's actually 3 types of files for each job. So this, we'll scroll down to the jobs here. So start finding files with the name job, whatever. So job cleanup events, and then there's a job file for DB2, MS SQL, which is the Microsoft SQL, and Oracle. So you'll need to find the job files for your type of database. And in my case, it's MS SQL. So one easy way to search for that is just to do a filter of job star MS SQL. And that way we're only finding jobs that contain the word job and MS SQL. We're saying starts with job, star means whatever you want in the middle. It can be wildcard, and ends somewhere with my MS SQL. So we find that there's these 10 items. You might notice that there would be less jobs in your infrastructure. It really depends on what version of vCenter you're running. So I'm on 5.1, which has 10 jobs. I know that version 4.1 only had 8 jobs, so it's just going to vary a little bit. But either way, as long as you find something that has the word job in it and has MS SQL, which is the database I'm using, you're good to go. So the next part you'd want to do is grab these files and actually copy them to somewhere that the SQL server can see. And in my case, I'm just going to copy them to the SQL server. So let's switch back to the SQL server. There we go. I'm going to minimize the Management Studio here. And I'm going to show you, this is the folder where I went ahead and just copied the 10 jobs. And they're all, as you can see, job, whatever, MS SQL. And because it's on the SQL server, which understands the .SQL file, they get a nice little icon, and they're shown as a type of, I hate when that happens, of a SQL query file. There's 2 ways you can import these. I would say the hard way and the easy way. And the hard way requires no scripting or anything. You actually just open up SQL Management Studio. And let me go ahead and just delete all my jobs here that are for vCenter. So I'm just going to select all these VCDB job files and just delete them. And click OK. It's going to just purge all these job files, and that's fine. I don't really care. So the hard way, or at least the more cumbersome way, is to actually go to File and open a file, and then navigate and open every one of these jobs individually. And I mean, this works fine. It's just very cumbersome. And you'll notice it opens this job query here. And the first thing you'd want to do is make sure to change the database from master, which you don't want, to whatever the name of your vCenter database is, which you do want. So I would change it to VCDB, and I can execute that. It'll say it's completed successfully. And if I refresh jobs, we can do a refresh here, we'll see that it's there, and it's the correct job, says event task cleanup VCDB, which we saw before. But the problem is I'd have to do this 9 more times. It's very manual. And I don't know, if you're doing it on a more repetitious manner, I just like to script things. It's much more fun. So let's delete this and do it the more fun and easier way, the less error prone at least. So that job's gone. I'm going to actually close the query that we had open. So the other method you can use is a script. And I have a script here. It's just stored in a text document. It's not something you can run on its own. But you can see here I'm using the SQL command prompt, basically SQLCMD is the command. So this is basically what we're running, and you can run that right on your SQL server or anything that has SQLCMD installed upon it. And then the format is the -S is denoting what the name of the server that I want to run this query against is. So in this case, I'm telling it the server is named SQL because that's what I named my SQL server in the lab. And then the -D is specifying which database we want to run this query against. And in this case, it's my vCenter database, the VCDB database. And then the -I is basically the instructions of where to find the path to the job file. And I copied them all to this folder called SQL Server Agent Jobs folder. And I'm specifying each one of these SQL job files. So basically, you can generate this portion of the command and then just copy it 10 times and insert the name of these files. And you can run this against a command prompt. So I'm just going to run a command prompt here. In fact, I'm going to close that because I don't want to run just a regular command prompt. I want to right-click it and run as administrator. It's a pretty good practice to get in the habit of when you're running on Windows 2008 or better, just because otherwise it may be a failure of a job. The job will kill itself because it does not have administrative access to the server. So we're running as an administrator, and all I'm going to do here is just select all of this, all these commands, and just copy them. And I'll paste them into the prompt, and as it pastes in, it'll execute the commands, and you'll need to hit enter on the very last one. And there we go. There's no response or anything. It's successful if you get nothing, and if there's a problem, you'll receive a response saying, I couldn't find the file, or I didn't have access, or whatever it may be. Now, if we go to the jobs, I can do a refresh, and there's all my jobs, and they're pointing to the correct database. It's the vCenter database, and you can even run one of these. So I can right-click on this event task cleanup. We'll start the job at step, and should be successful for both of these items. That's a pretty easy way to know that you've done it correctly.
Don't miss out on my future videos. Become a YouTube subscriber today. Do you crave more content on home labs, technical certifications, deep dives, product reviews, and geeky shenanigans? Wall Network is also available in blog format at wallnetwork.com.